I'm a small town kid born with a big city spirit. I choose to play a lot of awesome roles in life: mom, wife, entrepreneur, CEO, board member, investor, and mentor. 17 years ago, I founded a marketing consultancy, and ever since, my husband JR and I have been building our careers and our family on the exact same timeline. Yep, that means 4 kids, 3 businesses, 2 careers, all building towards one life we love. When I discovered I could purposefully embrace all of these ands in my life, it unlocked my world. And I want that for you too. I'm Tiffany Souter, and this is Scared Confident. Ashley and I have a few mutual connections, and I think we've met once in person, like casually at a cocktail hour kind of situation. She contacted me through Scared Confident and just said like, hey, I really want to talk to you. I think that there's things that I can learn from you. Ashley's got a lot of things going on in her life. She's 26. She's married. She's got a baby that's just a little over a year old. She's running her own business, and she and her husband are really figuring out how do they put the ingredients together in a way that helps them work towards their goals. And they've made some really unconventional choices. I think you're going to really enjoy listening how she is solving how do you balance what it means to get what you want out of life, what your husband or spouse wants out of life. And, she's got a big personality. She is dominant, she's social, she's curious, and that can create a really interesting mix of ingredients. And so I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Ashley. Let's start by orienting me a little bit. I mean, I know about we met at an event briefly, and then I've spent a little time on your website, but sort of like where are you at in your life, what your business does, how big it is, and then we can sort of like launch into your questions.
Oh, goodness. Where do I begin? So business-wise, I've had my company for 3 years. It's been quite the journey, 2 years full-time. So my backstory, I worked in vocational ministry for a while, actually, and did a lot of marketing there. My husband and I were long distance. So I was in West Palm Beach, Florida, working for a mega church down there, and he was up here. And originally he wanted to move down there, and I was just kind of ready. I knew that wasn't it for me. I went into ministry kind of for the impact and just felt like our church, I think our team at that point was like 300 or 400 and our weekend attendance was about 50,000. So at that point, the level of impact with that many people, I felt I loved the work that we were doing, but I didn't feel like I was able to really, make the impact that I went into ministry to make. So I moved back to Indianapolis, went into sales and property management, knew that I needed to fill my quota, and quickly figured out how to do that with marketing. And so that was kind of the pull where I kind of almost joke that I accidentally started my business because I moved into more of a marketing role. And that was what I wanted my career path to be. I wanted to grow. I fell in love with marketing until the company decided that they were going to stop growing and they were going in a different direction. So I knew that it was time to make a move. And so during that time, the business came about essentially by different tenants that I leased to, knowing and seeing what I was doing and asking for my help. So went to my boss and said, hey, is this something I want to be mindful of my time here, but is this something that after hours that I would be able to help them with? So I would give advice for free when I was there, whenever I had a down minute, I'd go in their office and show them some things. Long story short, I had a mentor that said, Ashley, do you want a business or do you want a hobby? And was freelancing and doing ghostwriting because I really, at that point, wanted to move more in the marketing lane. So fast forward a little bit, I started the business. It was a full-time side hustle, 2019 to the end of 2020. I met Brian shortly after that. That was about when I had first learned about you and the work you were doing. So you were an unspoken mentor from afar from me, which was fantastic. And January of 2020, right before the pandemic, is when I quit my job and took it full-time.
Okay.
I was terrified. I wanted to go work somewhere else. Brian talked me off that ledge. And 2-3 years later, here we are. So that's the backstory of business. Today, Anya, we're a firm, a team of, there's about 5 of us full-time, full-time in office, and then contractors and other team members we leverage. We do paid online advertising and social media and work with companies that want to see more of an ROI on their online ads, social media. So that's the business side.
2 quick questions before you go into the personal. So she's talking about Brian Kavicki, who you hear on the podcast. He's kind of a repeat
Yep.
a repeat customer. But when he talked you off the ledge, what did that sound like?
Oof. Oh man. Yeah, for everyone listening that doesn't know Brian, a lot of asking really, really good questions. I'm stubborn enough that it's hard for me, not stubborn, but I feel like I have to come to my own conclusions and I've had to learn lessons the hard way. And so he just really asked me what I really wanted and kind of at first just was like, is Ashley, is that really what you want? You want to go back and lose all the autonomy? You want to go back to a cube farm? You want to go to a culture where you're just going to be another cog in a wheel when that was why you left what you were doing? And I kind of had that epiphany of, oh, yeah. And then during the pandemic, too, just really helped me see everything because that was what I was afraid of, too. Here I am 6 weeks into being self employed full time, and the world is shutting down. So it was a scary time. And Brian helped me reframe it to really see it as the opportunity as it was with everyone needing what I had to offer at that point and recognizing it to be one of the greatest opportunities that was in front of me. So that was kind of when the switch flipped.
So, and then another question I have, you started working with property owners, right? Marketing.
Or business owners
Okay.
that leased with me through property management.
So who do you target now with Anya?
Yeah, I would say high lifetime value service-based businesses. So
Okay.
HVAC, roofing, but also organizations or brands wanting to make an impact. So nonprofits, event venues, hotels, entertainment, things like that.
Okay. Helpful. Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah. This
absolutely.
helps me orient. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Now personal. Let's go into that part.
Personal. Okay. Been married for 5 years now.
Okay.
My husband and I have been together a total of 9 years. So that was quite a journey. Met in high school. We're not high school sweethearts. That's the short version there. My husband works with me as well, full time, part time, and does the stay at home dad life a little
Okay.
bit. So
Okay.
that's been a fun new journey. And we are parents to our first, and she is 14 months old. So
Okay.
this has been a new, crazy, fun season. So that's the personal side. It's been exciting, a lot of change and a lot of growth all in one short season, but life is busy, but life is fun.
What was the journey for you guys to decide for him to like maybe take a step? These are my words.
Yeah.
Take a step back from his career. You guys to choose, because my husband and I have chosen a 2-career home that has its own complexity. Some families choose the woman to stay home and support the family that way, and then others choose what you guys at least have for right
Kind of
now.
a hybrid, yeah.
I think a lot of young professionals are trying to get an understanding of what are the options and what's right for my situation. So double clicking a little bit into what that looked like, because it is a teamwork. No matter what one you choose, it's hard. They're all hard. They all take work, and they all require teamwork, but of different sort of flavors. So I would be just curious a little bit, and you sharing some of that backstory.
So it's still, I feel like it's still in process, right? It's definitely is because he does about two, it kind of ebbs and flows too with what's happening in the company. Like we have a transition happening internally right now. I'm going to need him a little bit more once we have that new person brought in and oriented and we've navigated that transition, then he can kind of take a back seat. But it was hard, particularly coming from, so my degree is in biblical studies. I have a very strong ministry background, and depending on kind of the environment you're from, I think the unspoken perception that always was inadvertently made clear to me in that kind of capacity is that, oh, husband leads. So there's like a lot of that mentality. And that's never been us. I have a very dominant, very assertive personality, and my husband and I complement one another really well because I'm DI on disc for anyone listening, and my husband's SC. So he's very passive, very reserved, very likes to do things by the book, by the rules. But it's funny, he is a job person and I am a career person. And I think that it took a while for me to understand those are two different things. I am motivated by constantly growing, being on, like innovating things, creating things. I like change. I like having something to shake up the structure. I hate consistency. It bores me and it's really hard for me. My husband likes to clock in and clock out. He would be perfectly content in a 9 to 5 if he had to do it. But his motivation to work would be to provide for family, and mine is, again, simultaneous, but also to grow. And that's how I find a lot of my identity in what I do. And that can be, I think, a lot of times a bad thing, but I also think it can be a good thing too, because we're motivated differently. So the decision to stay home, My earning potential too is also just based on my experience and how hungry I am. We recognized financially for our family that I would probably out earn him.
Mhm.
And so that was another priority to consider. And quite frankly, I just enjoy it more. So that's really kind of what it's boiled down to. And we've made a good team because I think a lot of people are like, oh, so it's a husband, wife owned business. And I'm like, yes, my husband partners with me, but he would always defer and kind of say, well, this is kind of, I remember we had an employee that started and out of respect, she would run stuff by both of us. And he's like, I have no idea what's going on. Just referred to Ashley. And so I feel like it works for us. We have different interests and different focuses and both bring different strengths to the table. And he definitely is a lot more nurturing, a lot more, I think, that stable, consistent presence. And I am a little bit more of the unpredictable spitfire that likes to
Mhm.
do a lot of different things. So it's definitely been an evolution, ebbs and flows, but it has been really nice. Gosh, to be able to go see my daughter, he can bring her to me when I miss her at work. Like, it's been a really good handoff, but it does come with trade offs.
Mhm. I think there's a lot of power, Ashley, in what you're saying, which is you guys know what you are.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we can chase outcomes that we want that aren't who we are. And like I'm a DI, my husband's a DC,
Mhm.
and we are both like career people, not job people. We're both growth minded. And in our world, our family can dry up if we're not careful because we get so much energy from the outside world. So we've had to work really intentionally, to like make sure that we're also getting a lot of fulfillment from our little cocoon of a family and investing well in that. But I think that there's a lot and no doubt you and your husband will go through this season as you're trying to find like friends and your spot in the world where you like don't fit in some places and it
Absolutely.
feels weird and there's like pressures that challenge some of those decisions even though they're like very much what's right for your family. So I don't know, I just guess I want to encourage you in
Thank
that
you.
time redeems it. And we went through seasons where, my friends had chosen to stay home. A lot more of them work now that our kids are like in
Hmm.
middle school, but they chose to stay home when we were younger. And there was a season where I just felt like I didn't fit. And
Sure.
and so then you kind of wonder, like, am I doing it wrong? Like, what does
Yeah.
that mean? And it gets kind of weird sometimes. So I just want to encourage you that
Thank you.
time does redeem it. You do start to get really clear in who you are, and you sort of over time find your people that you sort of figure out a way to connect with. So
I love that. Thank you.
yeah, so I would love to be helpful. You reached out and
I did.
said, hey, I have some questions. I appreciate your courage in doing this on the microphone, because part of this project of Scared Confident is creating the resource I'd wished I'd had as
Yeah.
a young mom and young entrepreneur with like sort of more ideas than I had talent to execute and
Absolutely.
trying to figure
Relate.
out what do I do with all that's
Yeah.
in my head. So I would love to be a resource if it can be and sort of,
Thank you.
spill out some of the stuff you're working through, and appreciate you courageously sharing that with other people who no doubt have the same questions.
Thank you. No, it's been so fun because I've followed you for so long that I've been able to see, oh my goodness, and just am in so in awe of what you've built and the sacrifices that you've made to do that. And it's been so fun to watch those bits and pieces. But there's so many things I'm curious about. But one thing that I'm really curious about is like what was going through your psyche and what emotional maturity and growth did you have to go through? Because I know you've been through so many ups and downs, and I have too. I think last year we just went through, gosh, probably the lowest low that I'd had in the business with just teen transition and growing too quickly. Our growth outpaced operations. That led to a lot of problems, and it was a very low moment for me. And it was a good moment though, and a really teachable moment because I learned so many lessons that came through in that period. But it definitely shook me up. So I'm curious, as you've gone through seasons like that, what have been not the tactics, but like maybe the things that you've told yourself internally or that you've been able to maybe reframe some of those things and to learn from them, but not to forget those lessons too, to continue on.
We don't know each other well, but I suspect we have similar wiring. We're both
Sure.
DIs. So I'm very excitable and
Yes.
I'm very exciting. I suspect you are too.
Yeah.
I'm excitable and I'm exciting. And in the early days, that's very magnetic because it brings people close to you that like you kind of don't deserve to employ. They bring talents, but they're just energized by what's in your mind, and they kind of believe you're going to figure it out. But when you do run into really hard times, the like lows can be draining,
Mm.
where you don't have your adrenaline to rely
Right.
on to wake yourself up the next day. And I think with maturity, I have learned to mature much more evenly and to react much more evenly. The things that are amazing that are going on, I'm probably not quite that good. And the things that are going terrible, I'm not quite that bad.
Mm.
Like we would win a deal, we would sound a gong, like marching band would go through the size that we would celebrate. Instead of being like, that's sort of what we need to do. We need to like close new deals, bring on new logos, and we should be happy about that. But we don't need to throw a party and have a high school marching band go through every single time. And also, when something bad happens, somebody leaves, you have a plan. And when it doesn't come together, it's really annoying, especially for people who are really energy oriented.
Sure.
And so I think just reacting to the lows in a way that are a lot more even and reasoned, and realizing like everything is solving and everything is progress.
Mm.
And whether it looks like forward or backward, it's progress because you're
Yeah.
learning. And I remember actually talking to Brian and wanting to get to this place where I suddenly found a prairie. Like that was like the picture in my head. A peaceful prairie where there were no problems. I had solved everything in the business. Everybody was in their seat. Everybody was trained. Every client was happy. My employee net promoter scores were strong, and I had the time I needed. Like there would be a day where I arrived and the meadow was there.
Yeah.
And he was like, "You realize your job is to find problems."
Mm.
And I was like simultaneously so annoyed and suddenly so relieved that is my job, and reframing that to myself that if I am seeing a prairie, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
Because literally there's no possible way everything is perfectly clipped in. But my eye, I think, my like need for it to be good and people to like me and it to be likable, one, it was sort of had me in this harried pursuit of this fantasy existence that was never going to be. And so every time I found a problem, it felt like personal. We're doing it wrong or whatever it was. And it is personal because I probably was doing it wrong. But now I just feel like I reframe it as like, it's my job to find problems. It's my job to process those problems and to figure out, are they big enough priorities to address or do we just let them be? And now we have mechanisms by which we solve things. And that was not the way that I looked at it for a really long time. And it was exhausting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, so much gold there. But one thing that I think is a really important distinction that I've been learning to make that I would love to hear from you on too, in that is saying that you're not that good or you're not that bad, but also how were you able to separate, and maybe didn't have the struggle, but element 3 is performing well, element 3 is performing bad, to Tiffany is good or Tiffany is bad. I know for me, that's one thing that Brian and I have worked a lot through, that just because a mistake or something happens does not mean me, Ashley Monk, is a bad person or did something wrong. It just means there was a problem that needed to be solved or needed to be solved differently. So I'm curious if that's an experience you had, and if so, how you were able to separate.
I think there's a couple of root causes when I got it wrong. Sometimes it was I just didn't know.
Mm.
And those for me are easier to accept. Like, I just didn't know. And I joke, but it's not a joke. Every day I've run this company is my first time I've seen it that size. I didn't secretly get to go run a $20 million business and know what that felt like and then come do it in the public. It was like every year we grow, I've never run a company that size. Every time. So sometimes you just don't know because you don't have the experience, you don't have the person in your network, you didn't even know to ask the question.
Right.
Those to me are like easier to digest. Then there are things that I got wrong that I actually knew the right answer to, and I was too chicken or like cowardly to like make the call, make the phone call, do the thing that I like knew to do, but I didn't because I talked myself out of it. I chickened out. I just wasn't big enough to like do it. And those I think those are the moments that it was personal because I knew I wasn't doing even what my instincts knew to do.
Mm.
So I don't know. But for me, when I failed, when I went to bed at night, I sort of knew why.
Okay. Yeah.
When I wasn't showing up well for myself and when I just didn't know. I also, I would say I had a hard time getting out of client work for the ego reason. Like you sort of talked about, like I got a lot of feedback personally and professionally from, oh my word, that was an amazing brand plan or whatever. Like, oh my word, you just really get us. Like, oh my word, you added so much value to my life. Like, oh my word, we wouldn't be where we are without you. And you're also very young. I didn't work for somebody. I was 25 when I started Element 3. And so you're also trying to figure out, like, what do I know professionally?
Right.
Like, what am I good at? And you don't have a boss who comes and gives you a review that says, like, here are all the things you're awesome at, Ashley. And so you do rely on the environment, especially as an I, to like tell you. And it does like put air in your balloons, like, oh, that feels good. And so as you start to get more into like actual leading away from client work, it is weird how it has to become so intrinsic where you're like, I know I'm good at this. And I practice saying it out loud because I have to for myself. I know what I'm good at. I'm a really good communicator. I'm a really good synthesizer. I'm really good at being honest in really complex situations. I'm really good at simplifying things. And that is how I claim for myself what I'm good at. Because other people, they don't tell you when you've been a CEO. Since how old were you when you started this?
I'm 26 and I started at 23.
Yeah. So I was 24 and a half. So like very similar. And it's weird.
It is.
It's super weird. When you're 20 something and you decide to do it on your own,
Right.
if you don't know how to pick that out of the world, you are your own ceiling like the whole way. So I give you a lot of just credit for being intentional about these conversations, leaning hard into Brian. You know, you like pay for those things before you can afford them.
Yeah.
Because you know it's like critical.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know what I would do without Brian.
I'd be hacking somebody else's quota.
Yeah. Exactly. So Brian had me read The Big Leap. It was fantastic. One thing that I have noticed about myself and just my personality is that it is really hard for me to find the line between what is me self-sabotaging success, what is boredom, or what is maybe out of alignment with what I want to be or what I should be doing. So I'll give you some context. There's one thing for sure. I love being a business owner. And I know that's true of your story too. I remember hearing on the podcast that one thing that you mentioned is I don't know what the industry would have been, happened to be marketing. And so I really resonate with that because I really do. Ups, downs, highs, lows, the autonomy, the freedom, the flexibility, the blank canvas to be able to build something. It's fun and exciting to me. But I've noticed that there are times, and it's been hard for me to put my finger on it when sometimes, things are going fantastic. And maybe that is just me questioning and wondering when the next shoe is going to drop as a self-protection mechanism. Then there's times where maybe I've just been in a role in a place that's draining to me and maybe I need something. But then more recently, there's just been this tug and this pull of, is this the right industry? Is this, and I think this, I don't know where it comes from, but this thought that I don't know, that I'm supposed to know exactly what I'm going to do every single day of my life. And I'm supposed to have this clear vision of what that looks like. And so I'm curious if you ever experienced that. And with all the ideas you've had, how you've maybe wrestled between what is maybe an upper limit or a time where you're going into self-sabotage, what is just boredom and maybe you need some time off and you need a new project, or what is maybe a sign that maybe there's a pivot in the way that you offer what it is that you do with the industry changing.
I have a few different answers to it. The first is that it is very hard for me not to get distracted. I feel that hard. And I am in a season right now of my life where I get to explore my ideas more than I was able to when I was 24, 25, just getting started. Well, even in the last 15 years, I haven't. And what I said to myself was, I have to earn the right to learn how to grow something. And when I've done that, and when it can sustain itself, and when it's paying me what I'm worth plus, then I open the gate to be able to try other things. This is my formula. You could probably find somebody to go talk to that was really successful, I think, inward pictures, thanks to my mom. I picture like a stove. I had one pot boiling, and I wanted to fill the water up and boil it as high and hot as I could. Some people I think have like frying pans, and they're like 6-burner stove, and they've got like 6 of them rolling. I just, that's not really how I learn. I think I know things way before I actually do. I naturally need very little information to make a decision and move fast. But I thought I was so successful because I was selling so much crap.
Right.
But I had no clue how to build the system, the people, the training, the infrastructure, the culture, the communication, to pick the right technology, to have the right insurance, to have the right cybersecurity, all the things that are required to build a business that can be lasting. I had no idea. And I'm grateful that it took me 17 years to do it. And not that I don't still have a lot to learn. We certainly do. But for me, I knew I had to redeem the money that had been put into that thing, the time that I had put into it, and I needed to get to a place where it was actually sustainable. And agencies are hard because they feed off their principles hard if you aren't really, really intentional. And that was one of the things that was important to me. I will always be a channel for Element 3. I will always bring in revenue because I love it. But we've spent money on marketing as an agency our entire existence because my plan was always, I don't want to get to 55 and just be so tired of this thing feeding off of me personally that I don't have any other options. And as I looked around the landscape, that was happening.
Right.
And so that's a strategic decision that I made to say, how do I get this thing to live on its own? Or at least more so than it was in the early days. I mean, right now it's feeding off of you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I always dreamed of speaking. I always dreamed of doing a podcast. I always dreamed of investing in other business owners. I always dreamed of serving in a greater capacity on boards. Like you talk about the learning process giving you so much energy. Like I would rather go wide and shallow than narrow and deep every day of the week. It's just so much more energizing.
Sure.
But I felt like I had to earn it. And that sort of thinking of it as not never, but stage gating it, I think helped me have a lot of discipline. The only things we spent time on for probably the first 15 years was our family, our business, and our church.
Yeah.
I didn't even really hang out with my friends. I see my girlfriends need an award for sort of sticking with me for a decade. I like to think that maybe my jokes are funny enough. I kept getting invited back, even though I really didn't go to anything for so long. Because I just couldn't. It was my family, it was my business, and it was church. And that was all we did. And that helped us, I think, get to a place where, our family is strong, Element 3 is strong, and now I have some opportunities to branch out. But the same poison will always exist. I can still get too distracted. I can still overextend myself in a way that kind of my core doesn't get as much of my time as it needs.
What has been maybe the sandbox that you've created for yourself, or the fuel that you've kind of been able to give yourself to keep the course and doing that thing? And what have you maybe told yourself when you've wanted to maybe wander and indulge in one of those new ideas or projects?
Well, usually it's because I hate part of what I'm doing that I start looking outside. And so it's getting really clear about what am I doing that I hate and how do I get rid of that?
Right.
So I hated project management and detail like that. So I would figure out how much revenue do I have to sell to be able to afford that person, or can I go hire somebody in a part-time capacity to take these pieces? So I would even stage gate that. I just gave up the last department. I ran sales and marketing for my whole time here and just sent that to Kyler. And over the last 2 years, making a list of my priorities of what I was doing, and in reverse order, the things I didn't like the most, I gave to Kyler first, and the things I liked the most, I gave to him last.
Right.
And I think as business owners, we don't always think about how we are always crafting our own futures, and we automatically just fill the holes in. There's not an AE, so I need to sit in that role. There's not this, so I need to step into that role. And our lives then become this casserole of filling in the gaps instead of saying, I'm going to start with what I want my time to look like. And everything that doesn't fit in that box, I'm going to start grouping it and creating strategies for how I get that off my plate so that my job is giving me a lot of energy. It took me a very long time to mature into seeing that that was something I even deserved, because I saw my job to serve the business in whatever capacity it needed to keep it alive.
How did you do that with the areas that still needed so much from you? Because everything you're saying resonates wholeheartedly with me. I think I could look back in my calendar and tell you that probably a part of why I personally feel relatively tired right now is I'm just doing things outside of Genius that I don't enjoy doing, but they're what's necessary. So probably 80% of my time goes to business development. And while I enjoy parts of business development, it's definitely my zone of genius is strategy. I would love to be in strategy all day long. But the business needs business development to obviously grow, to hit our goals. And so I just have put my blinders on and continue to do that. How were you able to continue to feed and pour into those areas of the business that needed you while still maybe making room for some of the things that you did enjoy during your day?
So I think we see time in a way that's funny when we're young. So like if I say a year to you, does that feel like long or short?
The older that I get, the shorter that it seems.
That's the point. Yeah, exactly. Most people in their 20s would say a year seems really long. So like Joe Mills, who is our salesperson, he's been with us for over 5 years. The first 2 years, he almost did nothing. Year one, all he did was follow me around. Because how do you teach what you know?
Yeah.
You don't know. How do I teach my perspective on? I don't even know. I don't even know what I do now. But then I was like, I don't know. I don't know. All he did, I just paid him to follow me around.
Yeah.
And then year two, I would say the first 60 to 70% of the sales process, but he like administered the meetings and stuff, which was very helpful to me. And then year three, he would do like the smaller deals by himself. And then year four, like that's so long. But now, 5.5 years into it, it's like the mind meld is unbelievable. So I'm just going to use sales as an example. I knew it was going to be a ceiling for my time.
Sure.
If I stayed involved in the process as much as I was, for a couple of reasons. One is when you're the principal, the owner, your brain is really smart and it's hard to get rid of clients when you sold them.
Oh, absolutely.
They want you because everything else is just pushing you down the organization. So I was like, that doesn't work long term. The second is I knew I wanted to get to a place when my kids were in middle school where I was not as tied to my calendar, meaning, oh my word, it's 1:30. I've got to meet it too. Like that, like just constant pull. I wanted more flexibility. I don't want to work less. I want more flexibility.
Right.
I knew if prospects were driving my calendar, that was not going to be a future I was going to be able to create for myself. And the third one was I wanted to be able to build myself into a channel that was attracting bigger prospects, not in the weeds of deal management. So I had a couple of options. One was to go pay a bunch of money for somebody. And the second was to grow somebody that was like, going to work for me for like a cent and a half.
Sure.
But they had the right makings of turning them into something great. And I always get nervous. I think you could find somebody else who's had a lot of success with paying a lot of money for a salesperson. I always think if they're going to leave where they're at for a bunch of money to come to me, they'll probably leave me for a bunch of money for somebody else. Like I needed somebody who was like in it for the reasons that were, hey, I helped build what really tied into our culture, really understanding what we're trying to do in the world, and had an altruistic sense of like, this is important that we have really competent marketers growing brands and cultures. So it's kind of figuring out a place where do you need to get the business? Where does your monthly EBITDA need to be for you to take that bet on yourself?
Yeah.
And working towards, and it might be that it's 2.5, 3 years from now that you're like, I moved that off my plate. But think about, it is these big steps. When people do, like, I don't like to do these jobs, they're like moving 20 minutes around. In the jobs you and I are in, when I like moved Kyler into the presidency, it was like 30% of my calendar went away.
Right.
It's these huge step changes, but there's a preamble, knowing for sure that they can do it. There's that overlap. I mean, Kyler and I just spent 6 months where he and I both knew that this day was going to happen. Nobody external did, but I knew what I was preparing him for. He knew what, like we knew. And then now that it happened, I'm going to stay really close to him in this process for the next 6 to 12 months. And then he's ready to roll. It took like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
but he has a life that he's really excited about, and I'm going to have a life that I'm really excited. You know
Right.
what I mean? So I think that being committed in your soul to having a business is what gets you through.
Yeah.
And being like, I'm just not quitting on it.
Yeah.
These years totally suck. I'm sort of average qualified for the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I know I can do it good enough to get us another day.
Right.
And when I do that, I can hit these targets. When I hit those targets, that gives me the permission to do this thing. When I do this thing, it's going to be a year of transition. It's like one Christmas, you know,
Yeah.
it's like it goes fast, but it's also slow.
Right.
And it's like, it took 17 years. That is so long, but it also feels very short, actually, to get to a place where I am not tied to my calendar.
I love that. You nailed it on the head, because I think a lot of times people hear, I think the perception, especially with women, is always, oh, you have kids, you want to work less. And I've always related to where I think I went into the hospital at 4 o'clock to get induced on Monday. I had my daughter on Tuesday, but then I was back taking calls on Friday and went right back in on Monday and was going home, because the early stages too. And I knew that I didn't feel guilty going to work. My daughter was just sleeping all the time though. So it didn't, and it worked. But to your point, the flexibility has been the biggest thing, because that is how my calendar is run, from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. So I am curious, how have you though? Because there have definitely been seasons too, though, where now it's interesting, though I didn't really take a maternity leave. Now that my daughter is walking and starting to babble, I'm like, oh, there are moments that I want to be around. Not that I want to work less for, but I want to be able to drop by at 2 or 3 o'clock and maybe take her to the park one day, and then kind of go back and maybe finish up at night or with her nap schedule. But I'm curious though, I will say there have been definitely times where I have these goals and I have these targets that I want to hit, but then there's also this new pull. And it doesn't make me any less ambitious, but there's definitely, I don't know, it's like my heart and my capacity got a little bit bigger, but I want to have more capacity for more of those moments. So I'm curious how you navigated that with 4 amazing children in the different seasons that Element 3's had, how you've been able to adjust when the business has needed you, but then you wanted to be around and prioritize your family too.
I was really comfortable outsourcing a lot of the caretaking. I think about it too. There's caretaking and heart taking. In the younger years, it's a lot of caretaking,
Right.
baths and like routine and wiping their bib and cleaning the high chair. And like, it's caretaking. You obviously want to put them in a safe, loving environment, but you aren't teaching complex decision making and, character building in that way. So I've missed, I think, 2 of my kids' first day of kindergarten. I don't say this to brag. I just say like, I was comfortable missing these milestones, not all of them, knowing that there was something bigger that I was running towards. There's 2 things. One is thinking about, what do you need from the experience of being mom? And as they get older, you start to have to check in about what do they need from you as a mom.
Yeah.
I wrote an article recently about how to like not have a summer that sucks as a working parent, because I think summers are the hardest.
Yeah.
And I would get to the end of summer and realize I literally didn't put a swimsuit on. Like, I hate that. I hate that. I do now, but like when the thick of it, I was like, the babysitter took him to this. And so I would only pick 2 days. That's what I needed. I'd pick 2 Fridays and I would be done by 2, and I would take him to the pool and we would have hot dogs on the pool side and we would take home a lot of wet towels and like that whole thing.
Yeah.
I just needed to experience it. I just needed to do that with my kids for me. And so I guess I'll be brief and say, like, the first thing is, if that's what you want, you have to schedule it. You have to say on Tuesdays or the first Tuesday or on Fridays or 2 Thursdays a month, I go do this because I want to experience the stage with her, and give yourself permission to protect that commitment you've made to yourself, and treat it as important as insert big client name here.
Sure.
And just honor that, because it's what you need. And that's important, that you feel like you're getting what you need. If you're doing it for the reasons that are like, I feel guilty, I'm not, what I would, I have this thing about guilt, like guilt's choice. You didn't use the word guilty. I'm just sort of using this as another way that this can come up. And your daughter's not old enough to ask now, but your husband is there. She's in a safe, loving environment. And I just thought about like, the velocity I can create in the early days makes a different point in the line. If I go slower now, it's going to be 47 where I
Sure.
hit my goal versus, and I don't know. We don't actually get to like see life this way, but that's how I would think about it. I was like, I'm going hard right now because my goal was when my girls got to middle school that I would have a lot more flexibility. So that was important to me. I know other women who have made the choice to be really available when their kids are young and they have more flexibility later. But just know it's not going to be a perfect balance the whole way. Give yourself grace through that. And then also just like check in with yourself, especially when they're young. Like, what do I need to feel really close to their journey of development and growing, where you like feel like you're there for the things that you want to. I think everybody's first steps. And I heard somebody else told me the first steps are the ones you see. And I was like, I love that.
That's so
Those
good.
are the ones.
Good word
So
of
that was
advice.
easy for me to be like, I love them. They are so safe. I put a lot of energy into them, and they are not the only thing going on in my world. They are very important. And especially as they get older, they need to know that I am rock steady for them.
Yeah.
And I also have a big full life that I want to get out of this 30 years now that I'm going to be raising kids.
Yeah.
And I don't feel bad about that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's amazing. My last kind of question for you is, I'm sure that as you've started your company, as you started this journey and you've seen it, continue to see it through fruition, what are maybe the core ingredients that, looking back, if you maybe not do it all over again, but like looking back as a part of your journey, what were the core ingredients that you think should have just been fixed, that you're really glad that you were really rigid on and that were non-negotiables? And maybe what were some of the things that as time progressed and as you continue to evolve as a leader, maybe things that you're like, I could have let go of that, or I didn't, maybe I had too much prioritization on some of maybe the wrong things.
Yep. Those are a really mature question. So the first is if I ever start another company, I will understand that from the jump, I have to have an operational partner. I am one side of the circle, but I am not a complete one. And so I would never start a business without an operator. The second is that growth is a trap. And I saw that as the ultimate metric. And that was a very expensive lesson. The other is that learning that success is boring. Was a tragic thing for my personality to learn.
Sure.
But it is about doing the same things over and over and over and over and over again in a way that you just can do it with your eyes closed. And I had to really mature into that. Brian has a great saying that I think of a lot that says everything is a big deal. And if everything is a big deal, you'll have no big deals. And I think especially early with talent, you can kind of like let little things roll that like kind of give you a bad vibe, but you're like, I mean, I don't know, I've only seen it once.
Sure.
And I think that I got much better at talent. We got much better at things when I would make a big deal out of small things so that it never escalated to actually being a big thing. The adage that cash is king is actually true.
Yeah.
It matters a lot. And I felt like I could grow my way kind of out of anything.
Yeah.
Because I was able to make revenue, but revenue is different than cash. I still think the thing people underestimate is their brand. You know, even you saying like, I've watched you from afar. It's very humbling always to hear that, but it's been very intentional in building a brand. I didn't just want to build a company. I feel like it's a platform for leadership.
Yeah.
Brands are. And as I have grown, you know, I obviously think that my perspectives and beliefs are worth existing in the world. And if we're not willing to work to put them on stage, it leaves a lot of room for people who believe things that you don't. And so having the courage to build something, to invest in building something more lasting can take financial resources along the way, but I think it's worth it. So that would be my brain dump. I also would tell you, overinvest in your marriage. The kids get a lot of attention, and I don't mean for this to sound as trite as I'm going to say it, but like they will love you no matter what.
Sure.
But overinvest in your marriage. It's like the biggest gift you can give yourself as it relates to just the peacefulness in your own mind of the time, you know.
Right.
And when you're married, when you get in a big fight, it takes a lot of brain space.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. And overinvest in that. And it's the most important gift you can give your daughter too. I have a great mentor who says this, like, he's like, Tiffany, this is the time of your life. And when you see your days that way, like, this is the time of my life. You know, you're in a place where you have the opportunity to invest in this. You've got people around you that are rooting for you. You've got clients who are willing to give you a chance to learn your business. You've got, you know, like a husband who's supportive. You have a healthy daughter. This is the time of your life.
I love that.
And when you look at it that way, for me, it just like changes my perspective. Like, dang, that's true. This is the time of my life. So
thank you so much, Tiffany. I've looked forward to this interview for a while, and it's just been amazing to be able to learn from you and goodness, get to just talk to you and hear from you. So thank you for taking the time out of, I know, your crazy, crazy busy schedule to have this conversation.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Scared Confident. Until next time, keep telling fear, you will not decide what happens in my life. I will. If you want to get the inside scoop, sign up for my newsletter. We decided to make content for you instead of social media algorithms. The link is waiting for you in show notes, or you can head over to tiffanysauter.com. Thanks for listening in.